Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday, the day of double blessings. If you don't know, it is. I'm David.
I'm Stephan.
Welcome to Revival, the Good News Podcast. Happy you're here in the car or on a walk or whatever you're doing or midnight listening.
Okay, I have to ask you this.
Wow. Okay.
Sorry. Where do you think people listen to the podcast the most?
On a run in the car.
In the car.
I take it back. I think it's a good commute podcast.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Some podcasts.
Run is number 2
Run
or
is
walk.
Okay.
I bet they're tied. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Some podcasts you have to drive to Texas before you can finish. You know?
This one, quick, 25 minutes. Y'all, if it's your first time, welcome. As the name indicates, we hope that this is just a less than half hour filled with good news that is reviving to you. Remind you the thrill of living a life of faith, the beauty of living a life of faith. And what we do is we take conference talks and we each pick 3 good news headlines from the talk that kind of guide the discussion here. Welcome. We're so happy that you're here. We have a schedule. You can find that schedule at goodnewsbrandco.com or Good News Brand Co. on Instagram. There'll be links. You'll be able to find it. You can do it. If you want to know what order we're going in, there's these podcasts. There's 3 different Good News Brand podcasts, and they're all put in one spot with a newsletter and devotional and lesson teaching resources on the app. Also, we have a Good News Brand Co. app if you're interested in that. So anyways, welcome. If it's your first time, if not, you're an old time friend, and we're happy to be together. As you know, recently, Stephan has been insisting that we have a sponsor, a fake sponsor for every single episode. This episode is brought to you by those restored Broncos, Ford Broncos. People are taking the Ford Broncos from the late 70s and early 80s, and they're fixing them up real nice.
Really?
Real nice. And I just want you to know that every time one of those comes into my ad, I break the 10th commandment over my knee is what I do, because I covet that with every fiber of my soul. And then I scroll on to something uplifting. But anyways, that's the sponsor for today. But it's all about restoration, Stephan. That's religious.
Yeah.
It's a religious sponsorship.
Thanks for sponsoring stuff, Dave. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
If you were a car, what kind of car would you be?
That car. I want to be that car right now.
Really?
So bad.
Why?
Fixed up, I'm a driving witness of what the good Lord can do, because it was a 1978 and it's rusty, all nasty, and they just polished that up and you know what? They're expensive.
Are they really?
Oh yeah. They're like $250K for this.
Wow.
Yeah. And just think, they used to be like $8K. And I'm just saying, this is what can happen. Like you said a couple of weeks ago, redeemed humanity is way more beautiful than humanity that's never fallen. So, man, they just give a restoration vibe. And I'm given an excuse for why I can buy it right now, because I'm like, Jenny, it's church. So anyways, do you want to say what car you'd be?
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Helicopter. Just leave cars altogether. All right. Our talk today, P.S., is by Elder Gary E. Stevenson. I just really, really like him. That's what I want to say. It's called Bridging the 2 Great Commandments. That's the name of the talk. And here are our top 3 headlines each.
I think,
Stephan?
have you noticed this last 10, 15 years, leaders of the church have been talking more about the 2 Great Commandments? Have you?
No. I mean, I have not noticed, but I'm happy about it.
Yeah, I think I get a feeling that those pop up a lot,
This is like the 2 Great Commandments are like my thing. I know they're Jesus's thing. Okay.
I was going to say, I think someone beat you to that, Dave.
But it's the basis for my
yeah.
It is so foundational to the way I think and try and pattern and live my life. I'm so drawn to that conversation that Jesus has with that lawyer, because I feel like there's a lot of people might have a tendency to be a little bit nitpicky about what it looks like to live the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I'm just like, y'all, it's actually really, really simple. Someone who was a professional nitpicker came to Jesus and said, how do I live How do I live the gospel? And he answered so simply.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, this is really easy. Love God, love people, the end. That's what he say. This could be a 5-minute episode is what I'm trying to say to you.
Done. Cue the music. President Uchtdorf gave a talk called Love of God. I think it's 2008, somewhere around there. I could be wrong. And he talks about this, how people have a tendency to make long lists out of religion. And he's just, no, it's love God, love others.
Yeah.
And diligently, intensely, right?
Yeah.
But that's
deliberately. Yeah.
Sure.
That may have been one of my things, headlines. I just gave it away, but I can't remember. But go ahead.
Okay, here we go. This is number 3. Elder Stevenson says, for me, the application of the first great commandment can sometimes feel abstract, even daunting. I get that. Like, I really get that. It's like, okay, love God. And you're kind of like, what does that look like? Right? Because if I want to show love to my kid, last night Andrew was like, hey, Dad, do you want to play catch in the backyard? I'm like, yeah, of course. Right.
Yeah.
But with God, we ask ourselves, how do we do that?
Which is actually so interesting. I have this really interesting thought right now.
Please preach.
Because I think your son would need you to show that you love him,
Yeah.
because he's not a reader of thoughts and mind or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it becomes more important. But I was just thinking for a second when you were like, he says it's daunting to like love God. And when he said that, when I read that, I was like, really? Because I don't feel daunted by that at all. I just feel like I really just love him. I just think, and I'm actually kind of happy that he's a reader of minds and thoughts. I think I should show that love. I really want to. I do want to. I think that's where you're going. But
no.
I think there's like a great value in just that he understands like it's really hard sometimes to express to a person how much you love them and how much they mean to you. And you feel that occasionally where it'll just surge in your heart and you're just like, I don't know. Like Jenny doesn't know how much I love her, I don't think, because I wish she did, because like I was like, oh, I wish I could just like take my heart out of me for a second and put it in you. So you could sense like just the inexpressible kind of love that I have. And I like that God knows, It's like, I know exactly how you feel. Thank you. I don't know if to say thank you, but whatever. But, but that's the first time I've ever thought about that before.
Yeah.
It's like, I just love him even without doing a thing. I love him. And I'm glad he knows that.
That's awesome. I love that too. Gratefully, as I consider further words of Jesus, says Elder Stevenson, this commandment becomes much more graspable. Did I say that right?
Graspable? Yeah.
Okay. If you love me, keep my commandments. And then Elder Stevenson writes, this I can do. There's not really another relationship that is similar to our relationship with God. We can use earthly relationships somewhat to help us understand our relationship with God. Right. Yeah. And even
he does that when he says, call me a father.
Right. Or a shepherd.
Yeah.
Or,
even though he is. But
right. Yeah, absolutely. You say, okay, one of the primary manifestations of my relationship with God is that I seek his will. I'm trying to be obedient to him.
Yeah.
That can feel a little foreign because it's not like you go to your boss and you're like, command my life. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, on some level that happens, but even then, the way that this makes sense and resonates with the soul, the idea of keeping God's commandments, is we have to remember 2 things about him. He loves us and he knows everything. And if we know those 2 things and we see what his nature's like, particularly as it's manifested through Jesus, we then beg him to command our lives. We beg him to say, show me how to live, knowing that he will never demean us or hurt us or do anything that would take away our freedom or sense of self. All of those things he's trying to preserve, right? Not erase over, but he's trying to take the best parts of ourselves and redeem them and sanctify them. That's why we have commandments. And so when he said, the first commandment is love God, and then how do I do that? You follow him. That is the wisest thing anyone could do because he's full of love and perfectly knowing.
Yeah. And I would say of all commandments that thrills his heart the most when we keep, it's the second one, to love people, right? I think he likes it when we read our scriptures, like I think he's like, oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't read my scriptures and pray because of the commandment to. Maybe I do deep down. I feel like it's my way of connecting with him, just feeling my heart more drawn to him. So when I was reading this, I kind of thought, oh, sure. I think a way to show him love is, by reading scriptures. But my mind and heart think, the best way to show God love, I think the thing that puts the biggest smile on his face is not when I crack open the Book of Mormon, but when I love one of his other children. I just feel like that is, I don't know, significantly more thrilling to him to watch us take care of each other than, for me to turn on Hillsong.
Well, I mean, this is King Benjamin, right? If you are in the service of your fellow beings, right? And
yeah. Right.
Yeah. And
not to diminish those other things, by the way, but
and I want to say this too.
I think there's a hierarchy to which
there's no question. There's no question. There's a reason why it's the second.
Yeah. And that he says it's like unto the first.
Right.
They're like tied, he says.
Yeah. It's
for first place.
Very related.
It's a photo finish.
Right. And I want to say this. You said something that corrected me a little bit indirectly, and I don't think you were meaning to.
I did.
Oh,
Thanks for catching it. I'm just kidding. What?
I think keeping commandments is not just so that we can be happier or joyous or even have a sense of self. All that's great and fine, and that's true and fine. But I think we keep commandments so that we feel just close to him.
Right.
Right. We get more him, his presence, his glory, his goodness. Right.
Right.
And so ultimately, that's, I think, the best reason is I keep commandments because they draw me closer to him.
Yeah.
Right. And I live out his love and live in it by keeping commandments.
Such a unique person God is. Like he's almost
he's actually the most unique.
I know, it's so, because if I think about here's the things, well, actually, I'm backtracking before I even say it. But this is what I was thinking. Like a way I show Jenny love is I'll bring her flowers. Mm-hmm. Right. And because it's just a way I was thinking of you, here you go, and she's like, oh, thanks for thinking of me. But it's interesting, that God's commands to us are actually benefit us.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think he must like it when we think about him. He's just like, oh, thanks. Because I really like you. So I like when you think, I think about you all the time. So I like when you think about me. So certainly he must like that. Right. But the commandment that he gives for us to love him, he says, it's interestingly more about us than it is about him.
Right.
Yeah. We're just like, this will benefit. It's not for my benefit.
Right.
I'm not commanding you for my benefit.
Yeah.
I'm my mind is expanding on this as I'm talking. And I'm like, whew, it feels so simple. And yet the living out of these is so rich. It's so rich.
Yeah, absolutely. And that talk that I mentioned earlier,
Elder Uchtdorf's?
Yeah, love of God. He says, God doesn't need us to love him, but how we need to love him. Right.
Yeah.
And that's actually the best kind of love, because there's a kind of certain kind of love that a lot of us experience that's more out of neediness, right? Well, people will be kind to you, like, hey, come hang out with me. And you're like, this is more about you than it is about our relationship or something. Mm-hmm. And God, there's not a speck of neediness in him. He just loves. He just loves. That's his nature, right?
Okay, that was so fun. All right, number 3. My number 3 is, it's toward the end of his talk, paragraph 36, and he says, here's the line I just love. Because he says, there's a question, how do we build that bridge of faith and devotion to him? How do we love God? And then he just uses these 4 words. Well, we just start. And that is such good news to me. That anybody listening today, or in a week from now, or 18 years from now, if they just did decide, I would like to live a life of love of God and other people. The advice is, well, just start. We just start. No one's too young. No one's too old. No one's too nothing. Just, we can just begin. And I think that's such good news that we can, any time of our lives, just start loving at any hour. You could just, it doesn't need a warm up or a pre-workout. You don't even have to stretch. You can just start loving. Just start, and you'll get better at it and better at recognizing it. But isn't that cool? You can just no prerequisites. I hated prerequisites in college. Sorry. That's the world you love. But it just is.
I didn't invent prerequisites, babe.
but you support them by living in that system. Anyways, I think that's such good news.
It is really good news. And that was my number 2. And so
stolen.
But I'm going to keep going.
Yo, battleship.
because just right after that, he says this: our initial efforts might look like a plan on the back of a napkin or an early stage blueprint of the bridge we hope to construct. It might consist of a few realistic goals to understand the Lord's gospel more or to vow to judge others less. No one is too young or too old to begin. First of all, I love that goal that he just mentioned as an example. Because a lot of times, like, I'm going to set a gospel goal. I'm going to read scripture more, which is good. But that one's a very second commandment goal to set, right?
Yeah.
Over time, with prayerful and thoughtful planning, rough ideas are refined. New actions become habits. Early drafts become polished blueprints. We build our personal spiritual bridge with hearts and minds devoted to Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, as well as to other brothers and sisters with whom we work, play, and live. I just want to say this, that's
a long headline, by the way. You just seriously, like, just so you know, they're limited ink. Just kidding.
It didn't seem that long when I was but it was anyhow, okay.
It's all just good. It's like, yeah,
it was
like, what are you going to cut out?
I just want to say this. When he says, well, we just start, and then these little tiny efforts God takes and then sanctifies and makes them better. I just really feel like sometimes in my life, the most important moments were when I just started, when I just went for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt, I don't have the right language, so help me with this, but it felt a little fake. It felt like, I'm just going to go for this. I'm going to, take this life step and go on a mission or whatever it is, and just see how this works. The one that I think of the most is when I professionally, when it was like, I'm going to go to graduate school. And that's the moment where I was kind of like, this is not me. And I'm just going to, but God, I just felt His heart pulling me that way professionally, And so I just think there are those moments, we'll call them Sea of Galilee moments, where Jesus says, just start, get off that boat.
Step out.
That's
what I'm talking about.
And just, and it's God's hand when it feels a little stretching, a little out of your capacity, a little like, I don't know how good I am going to be at this. That's a better way to say it. And then you look back and say, wow, I'm so thankful that He called me out of the boat.
Isn't that true? I just feel like every good thing, every good decision, life decision I've ever made in my life, I didn't feel ready for.
Right.
And that's probably what made them so cool.
Right.
Yeah. Is that you were just like, like I remember getting married and feeling like I was playing house and bringing the kids home and being like, what the heck?
Right.
It's like, is this how my parents felt? I remember thinking that thought. Or like, is this how my parents felt? Or did they feel really secure in this decision? And really like, I just feel like.
Marriage takes faith. Right?
Yeah. Everything does. We just. No one's ready for it. And I think that's part of the thrill of it. If you were ready for it, I think it would take out the trust. I think it would take out the wonder. I think it would take out the hope, not to disregard preparation, but there's got to be an element to stepping out of the boat that makes that, that no one tells that story, if Peter stays in the boat or if it's not stormy or if he doesn't sink.
Right.
There's so many elements to that story that make it such a good, relatable story. Okay, my number 2 is this line. Love for God is not limited or finite. It's infinite and eternal. It kind of excites my spirit. The other day, we have some friends who just got married, a nephew and a niece who just got married. And they were talking about, how much they love each other and whatever at the wedding and their vows or whatever, and I was like, the thought that came to my mind was like, oh, you have no idea. You have no idea where this is going to go. Jenny and I have been married for 25 years. And I just think I had no idea 25 years later, the kind of love that I would feel. Amen. I just didn't know. I never experienced it before. And to read this line that my love for God is not limited or finite, it's infinite and eternal. That relationship that I have with God, the way that I love Him, it feels so rich and so big, like the good kind of mystery and wonder. And I thought it was such good news to know, oh, that love is only going to grow. There are things about Him you haven't discovered yet. There are elements to your relationship that haven't blossomed or matured yet. I am so giddy about that.
I think that's a really beautiful way to say it. We'll never get over. We'll never get bored. Elder Maxwell, of our love for God, Elder Maxwell came to our mission. And if I remember correctly, he said something like, you'll never get over your gratitude for Jesus. It's the only thing that would make eternity interesting is loving God and loving others. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
It just keeps expounding and getting richer and richer. And yeah, so cool.
Okay, ready for my number one?
Yep.
He says this of the two great commandments. One is interdependent on the other. Love of the Lord is not complete if we neglect our neighbors. This outward love includes all of God's children without regard to gender, social class, race, sexuality, income, age, or ethnicity. We seek out those who are hurt and broken, the marginalized, for all are alike unto God. I just want to focus on that phrase, this good news, that Jesus doesn't command us to be okay with the hurt and broken and marginalized. He doesn't say, oh, welcome them, which both are good. Both are good, right? He doesn't say, be friendly to them if they come to church. It's better than that. He says, seek them out. Go find them. Go make them your friend. Go be a part of their lives. Love them, bless them. And so whatever your planning system is, whether it's calendar or to-do list or whatever, your Franklin Covey plan or whatever you use, an essential part of it is to make time to seek out the marginalized and to serve and to minister and make that a routine and a part of our Christian life is to seek out those on the margins.
My number one actually goes really similar with that, where that commandment to succor the weak, to lift up the hands that hang down and strengthen the feeble knees those are beautiful words, but when they're lived out, I just was overwhelmed by this. He gives two examples in his talk about people who live out the two great commandments. And one of them was of a gentleman who just secretly did those three things for people his whole life. And the response, a letter from a lady who said, oh, how I'd love to hear the things the Lord has to say to you when he expresses his gratitude for how good you were. And then this line, I often wonder if the Lord picked you exclusively or if you were just the one who listened. And
that's awesome.
I know. And I just want to say one of the great joys of my life and the anticipations of my life is living in a community of people who live the two great commandments. The kind of magic that happens when a group of people together decide to live those two great commandments. And just the people you will come to know, the acts of great devotion and love that you'll witness, that you'll just catch wind of, that you'll be a recipient of, that you will be a participant in. I'm like, what? How else do you want to spend your money and your time and your energy? Nothing will satisfy the soul the way living these two great commandments will, particularly in a covenant faith community, in a kingdom. This is kingdom life. It's what it means to live in the kingdom. And so grateful to be welcomed in and to be encouraged to participate in it as well.
The name for a community that loves God and loves each other, the word for that, and it's an old word. It's a word we've used a lot. That word is heaven. That word is heaven. And we get little pieces of it every time we love God and love others in our families, our neighborhoods, our community. It's heaven.
Amen. That's reviving. All right, y'all. See you next week.